Welcome to Mystery Manor, where every story is a new mystery waiting to be solved. Grab a coffee, stay curious, and share the thrill with fellow mystery lovers. Let's get started. Hercule Poirot and the Mystery of the Whispering Isle. Chapter 1: An Invitation to Mystery. The sea lay restless beneath the churning gray sky, its waves crashing furiously against the jagged cliffs of Whispering Isle. The storm had not yet arrived, but its presence loomed on the horizon, thick clouds gathering like an ominous promise. Against this backdrop, the ferry boat, its hull slick with salt spray, shuddered as it docked at the small jetty. A line of passengers disembarked, their coats flapping in the cold wind, faces turned downward against the spray. Among the passengers, a small man with a bowler hat perched carefully on his head, his elegant mustache untouched by the chaos of the wind, descended with characteristic precision. His luggage, a single compact suitcase, was carried ashore by a surly boatman who barely acknowledged him. Mayor M, said the man with a polite nod. He then stepped briskly onto the narrow stone path leading up to the manor. This was Hercule Poirot, clad detective and master of psychological insight, though today he was simply a guest. His arrival at Whispering Isle had been prompted by a curious letter, one signed by S. Felix Harcourt himself. The letter had offered no explanation, only an invitation: come to Whispering Isle this weekend. It is a matter of utmost importance. As Poirot climbed the winding path, he cast his gaze across the island. The cliffs, dark and foreboding, jutted into the sea like the teeth of a great beast. Beyond them, Hercule Manor perched precariously near the edge, its tall windows gleaming faintly in the fading light. The house, modern yet cold, was an imposing structure of stone and glass, the kind of place where secrets could thrive. At the top of the hill, a figure awaited him. Lady Genevieve Harcourt, S. Felix's young and beautiful second wife, stood near the entrance of the house, her silk scarf fluttering in the wind. She was wrapped in a long navy coat, her auburn hair pinned neatly beneath a velvet hat. As Poirot approached, her lips curved into a practiced smile. M. Poirot, she said warmly, extending a gloved hand. Welcome to Whispering Isle. I trust the journey was not too unpleasant. Not at all, Madame Pooh replied, bowing slightly as he took her hand. Although the sea, she's in a temper today. I hope it does not signify a storm of equal ferocity within the house. Lady JV's smile faltered for the briefest moment, and Poirot did not miss the flicker of tension in her eyes. Let us hope not, she said soft. Oh, I do come in, you must be cold. She led him through the grand entrance hall, where marble floors gleamed beneath a massive chandelier. The air inside was warmer, but no less oppressive. A butler appeared silently to take Pooh's coat and suitcase, then disappeared as swiftly as he had come. You are the last to arrive, Lady Genevieve continued, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she guided him through the house. Everyone else is in the drawing room. Sir Felix will join us shortly. He's been occupied. She hesitated on the word, as if searching for a better one. Poirot made no comment, though he filed away her hesitation in the recesses of his mind. They entered the drawing room, a large and elegant space dominated by an ornate fireplace and an array of leather armchairs arranged around a low table. The room was filled with the hum of conversation, but it ceased the moment Poirot stepped inside. The guests, four of them, turned to stare. It was not hostility, but curiosity tinged perhaps with suspicion. Ladies and gentlemen, said Lady Genevieve smoothly, allow me to introduce Monsieur Poirot. He will be joining us for the weekend. There was a brief pause before a man in his mid-30s with unruly dark hair and a paint-smeared shirt rose from his seat. The famous detective, he said with a hint of mockery. I've read about you. I'm Barra, our Sir Felix's son. A pleasure, Muir, said Poirot, shaking the young man's hand. He noted the firm grip, but also the tension in Barona's jaw. One by one, the other guests introduced themselves. Camilla Sinclair, S. Felix's secretary, a woman of impeccable posture and cool efficiency, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of something deeper resentment perhaps. Dr. Arthur Winslow, a family friend with a warm demeanor but an air of preoccupation, as if he carried an invisible burden. Lavinia March, a distant cousin and successful novelist, who observed Poirot with a gaze as sharp as her writing. Captain Geoffrey Abad, a former naval officer turned business partner of S. Felix, whose weathered face suggested he had weathered more than just storms at sea. Poirot exchanged pleasantries, his keen eyes Flitting from one face to the next, the atmosphere in the room was cordial on the surface, but beneath it tensions simmered the way Camilla Sinclair avoided Bernard's gaze, the way Lady Genevieve clutched her pearl when Captain Abbott spoke. All were subtle signs of unspoken grievances. As they settled into their seats, Lady Genevieve rang a small bell and a maid appeared with trays of tea and biscuits. The clinking of cups and spoons provided a brief respite from the underlying tension. "I understand you were invited by my father," Bernard said, suddenly fixing Poirot with a penetrating stare. "Did he tell you why?" "No," Poirot admitted. "The letter was brief. It merely stated that my presence was required." "Curious," Linnea murmured, tapping her finger against the rim of her teacup. "Felix is not the type to extend invitations without a reason." "Indeed," Pooh agreed, his gaze shifting to Lady Genevieve. "Perhaps Felix will enlighten us when he joins the party." Lady Jeannie's hand trembled slightly as she placed her cup on the saucer. "Yes, I'm sure he will. He's just attending to some last-minute business." The conversation drifted to lighter topics, but Poirot could not ignore the subtle undercurrents. The guests were not merely acquaintances, they were bound by complex ties of family, business, and perhaps betrayal. After tea, Lady Genevieve excused herself to check on Felix. Though her departure left an air of uncertainty, the guests dispersed, some heading to their rooms, others wandering the house, but the absence of Felix lingered like an unanswered question. Poirot, however, remained by the fireplace, his mind already piecing together the puzzle of this peculiar gathering. The storm outside intensified, the wind howling like a restless spirit. As Poirot gazed out the window, watching the waves lash against the cliffs, he felt a sense of foreboding settle over him. "There is a storm inside this house as well," he murmured to himself, "and I fear it will break soon." Just then the clock on the mantel struck 8. The sound echoed through the room like a warning bell. Poirot stirred slightly, his gaze shifting toward the empty doorway through which Lady Genevieve had departed. His instincts warned him that the absence of Felix was more than just a matter of lateness. As the storm battered the island and the wind howled, Poirot could feel the first gusts of a far more dangerous tempest brewing within these walls. With a final glance at the fire, he straightened his posture and smoothed the front of his jacket. "It is time," he murmured, "to uncover what secrets this house seeks to hide. But first, even the greatest detective must rest." Pooh ascended the grand staircase, his footsteps soft against the carpet. As he made his way to his room, there he carefully unpacked his belongings and lay down, his mind still spinning with unanswered questions. As the wind howled beyond the window, sleep came slowly, but eventually it did come. And with it, the promise of new revelations. In the morning, morning arrived at Whispering Isle with a bleak and oppressive sky, the light muted as though the storm clouds were reluctant to relinquish their hold. The smell of salt and damp earth filled the air as the household slowly stirred awake, but it was not long before tranquility gave way to unease. It was Camilla Sinclair who first raised the alarm. Her footsteps echoed urgently through the corridor as she rushed down to the drawing room, her face pale and her hands trembling. "Sir Felix, he's missing his room. It's empty." Lady Genevieve, seated at the table, nearly dropped her cup of tea. The delicate porcelain rattled against the saucer as she placed it down and rose, her expression shifting rapidly from confusion to panic. "Empty? What do you mean, Camilla? Where could he have gone?" "The window was open," Camilla replied breathlessly, "facing the sea, and you must see it for yourselves." Bernard Harcourt, lounging in the corner with a cigarette balanced between his fingers, raised a cynical eyebrow but said nothing. Poirot, who had been observing the morning dynamics, quietly set his cup aside and rose with measured grace. "Perhaps, mademoiselle, you would lead us there." A line of concerned guests, now fully alert, followed Camilla up the grand staircase. The corridor was silent except for the soft thud of their footsteps against the carpet. As they reached Felix's bedroom, the door stood ajar, a chill draft escaping into the hallway. Inside, the room was deceptively serene. The bed had not been slept in, and a small reading lamp still cast a dim glow low. The large window, however, was wide open, curtains billowing in the wind, framing the dramatic view of the sea beyond. Lady Genevieve gasped and clutched the doorway for support. Felix wouldn't have left in the middle of the night. He hated the cold. "This doesn't make sense." "Nevertheless, Madame," Poirot murmured, Stepping forward, we must consider all possibilities. The open window is indeed. Peculiar calm pointed toward a small table beside the window. His walking stick, it's missing. That's unlike him. He always needed it. The group stood in silence until Captain Jeffrey Abbott broke the spell. We should search the cliffs. If the window was open, he could have. He hesitated, unwilling to finish the thought. Let us not assume the worst just yet, Pooh interjected, his voice calm but firm. We will search, of course, but first I wish to examine the room. Lady Genevieve stepped back, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief as Poirot moved methodically around the room. His eyes flickered over the details, noting each item with precision. The bed covers had not been disturbed. On the nightstand sat a broken porcelain figurine, its pieces arranged haphazardly as if someone had tried to clean up the mess in a hurry. He picked up one of the larger fragments and examined it closely. A recent break, I think, he said, his tone thoughtful. Madame Aurore, did S. Felix often sleep with the window open? Never, she replied, shaking her head. He was particular about drafts. He always complained if the room wasn't perfectly warm. Interesting, Poirot murmured. He knelt by the window, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of the frame. There, caught in the latch, was a small piece of fabric silk. By the feel of it, he carefully removed it and slipped it into his pocket. What have you found? asked Lavinia March, who had been observing Poirot closely. A clue, perhaps, Poirot replied enigmatically. Rising to his feet, he leaned slightly out of the window, inspecting the wet ground below. To his surprise, there were no footprints visible on the soft earth beneath the window, an inconsistency that nagged at him. The ground is damp from last night's rain, he noted aloud. If S. Felix had climbed out or been forced out, there should be traces, but there are none. Captain Abbott frowned. Could he have fallen further out, closer to the cliffs? Perhaps, Pooh allowed, though his expression suggested he was not fully convinced. A sudden shout from outside shattered the stillness. Bernard Harcourt stood in the doorway, having returned from a brief foray toward the cliffs. Camilla found his walking stick, he announced grimly. Near the edge of the cliff, Lady Genevieve gasped, her composure crumbling. No, he can't be. Pooh placed a steadying hand on her arm. We do not know anything for certain yet, madam. I will go to the cliffs myself. The group made their way outside, the wind biting against their faces. Near the edge of the cliff, Camilla Sinclair stood motionless, the walking stick lying at her feet. She pointed silently toward the jagged rocks below, where the sea churned with relentless fury. It's as she said softly. I'm sure of it. Lady Gen sobbed quietly, and Bernard lit another cigarette, the flame flickering in the wind. His face was set, his expression cold and distant. He's gone, he said flatly. It was only a matter of time. Bernard, Lady Genevieve cried. How can you say such a thing? Because it's the truth, Bernard replied bitterly. My father made enemies of everyone, including his family. Don't act surprised. Poirot regarded Bernard carefully. And were you one of those enemies? Bernard exhaled smoke, his eyes narrowing. If you think I pushed him off the cliff, you're wasting your time. I think only that there is more to discover, Pooh replied smoothly. He turned to Camilla. Mademoiselle, may I see the walking stick? She handed it to him, and he examined it closely. There was a faint smudge of dirt near the handle, but nothing unusual. Satisfied, he handed it back. As the group began to disperse, Pooh lingered by the cliff's edge, his gaze fixed on the crashing waves below. The scent of perfume, faint but distinct, drifted past him, carried by the wind. It was the same scent he had noticed earlier in S. Felix's room. Returning to the house, Pooh once again examined the bedside table. He picked up the fragments of the broken figurine and then turned his attention to a silk scarf that Lady Genevieve had been wearing the previous evening. The scarf was missing. As he pondered this, a maid entered nervously, holding a sketchbook. I found this in Mr. Bernard's room, she said. I thought it might be important. Poirot accepted the sketchbook and flipped through the pages, pausing at several angry caricatures of Sir Felix, one in particular showing him falling off a cliff. He closed the book thoughtfully. He murmured, the threads of the puzzle are beginning to weave themselves, but the pattern is far from clear. As the day wore on, speculation among the guests varied. Some whispered of suicide, others of a tragic accident, but Poirot, standing by the window and watching the storm clouds gather again, knew that something more sinister lay beneath the surface. This is no accident, he said softly to himself. Someone has planned this very carefully, but the little gray cells will uncover the Truth Chapter 2 Clues on the cliffs. The search began in earnest, just as the wind picked up whistling across the cliffs like a warning from some ancient vengeful spirit. Captain Geoffrey Abbott led the way, his boots crunching against the rocky terrain as he scanned the landscape with practiced precision. Poirot followed closely, his sharp eyes observing every detail, every indent in the earth and every gust of wind that carried the scent of salt and mystery. Camilla Sinclair, Dr. Arthur Winslow, and Bernard Harcourt trailed behind, their faces taut with tension. Lady Genevieve had stayed behind in the manor too, distraught to continue, while Lavinia March had taken it upon herself to document the search in her ever-present notebook. There, Captain Abbott said, suddenly pointing to a cluster of jagged rocks at the base of the lighthouse. The group hurried down the uneven slope, their breath visible in the cold morning air. As they reached the rocks, Pooh's gaze was drawn to a splash of dark fabric snagged on a sharp outcrop. It was Sir Felix's overcoat, its lining torn and damp from the sea spray. The sight of it sent a shiver through Camilla Sinclair, who covered her mouth with her hand. His coat, she whispered, but where is he? Poirot bent down, examining the coat carefully. He retrieved a small crumpled receipt from one of the pockets and unfolded it with delicate fingers. It was for an expensive purchase, a pearl necklace dated just 2 days prior. Curious, Poirot murmured, tucking the receipt into his pocket. Captain Abbott scanned the surrounding rocks and crashing waves. If he fell from the cliffs, the body could be anywhere by now, he said grimly. Perhaps, Poirot replied, his tone noncommittal. He straightened and looked toward the lighthouse, its whitewashed walls stained with the wear of years. Let us speak to the lighthouse keeper. He may have seen something. When they reached the lighthouse door, Captain Abbott tried the handle, but it refused to budge. Locked, he muttered. We can't get in. Poirot considered this for a moment, then noted, very well, we will return later if needed. He cast a final glance toward the structure as though storing the image in his mind. The group proceeded to the nearby cottage where the lighthouse keeper, Mr. Finley, greeted them with suspicion. The old man had a weathered face and a perpetual squint. He peered at the group before reluctantly allowing them inside. Strange folk coming around on a morning like this, he muttered. What do you want? We are looking for S. Felix Harcourt, Poirot explained. He is missing, and we believe he may have come this way last night. Did you see anything unusual? Mr. Finley scratched his chin thoughtfully. I did see someone heading toward the cliffs late last night, he admitted. Couldn't see who. It was too dark and raining, Buck, but they were moving fast, like they didn't want to be seen. And you did not investigate? Poirot asked. Not my business, the old man replied with a shrug. People come and go as they please on this island. I don't ask questions. Dr. Winslow shifted uncomfortably. It could have been Felix, he said quietly. He's been under tremendous stress, his business dealings. There were complications. It wouldn't surprise me if he stopped abruptly, as though realizing he had said too much. Suicide, you mean? Bernard interjected, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. That's what you're implying, isn't it, doctor? That my father jumped? Dr. Winslow flushed. I'm only saying it's a possibility. Felix was not a man without troubles, and yet, Arrow said thoughtfully, a man burdened by such troubles might confide in someone. Did S. Felix share his concerns with you, doctor? Not directly, Winslow replied, avoiding Pooh's gaze, but I knew enough. Everyone did. Satisfied for the moment, Poirot thanked Mr. Finley and led the group back outside where the wind continued to batter the cliffs as they walked. Lavinia March caught up to Poirot, her notebook clutched tightly in her hands. I saw someone sneaking out of the manor last night, she confessed in a low voice. I was by the window in the library when I noticed a figure slipping through the side door. I couldn't tell who it was, but they were headed toward the cliffs. Pooh's eyes narrowed slightly. And why did you not mention this earlier, mademoiselle? I wasn't sure it was important, Lavinia replied, though the tremor in her voice suggested otherwise. Back at the manor, the group reconvened in the drawing room where a fire crackled in the hearth. Lady Genevieve sat by the window, staring out at the sea with vacant eyes. She turned as they entered, her gaze locking briefly on Poirot before shifting to Bernard. Did you find anything? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. His coat, Camilla said softly, and a receipt for a pearl necklace. Lady Genevieve's hand flew to her throat, but she said nothing. Pooh cleared his throat and turned to Camilla. You have been quiet, mademoiselle. I understand Sir Felix recently threatened to dismiss you from your position. Is that true? Camilla's eyes widened, and for a moment she looked ready to deny it, but then she sighed and nodded yes. He found out about a mistake I made with the company finances, a mistake that could have cost him a lot of money. I tried to fix it, but he said it was too late. He was planning to fire me after this weekend, and yet you stayed. Poirot observed. Why? 'Cause I wanted to explain myself, she replied, her voice breaking. I wanted him to understand that it wasn't betrayal, just a mistake, but he wouldn't listen. That's curious, Pooh murmured thoughtfully. He then turned to Bernard, who was lounging near the fireplace, sketchbook in hand. And you, Muir, what did you do last night? Bernard smirked. I went to bed early like a good boy. Interesting, Poirot replied, his gaze lingering on the sketchbook. May I see that? Bernard hesitated, then handed it over with a shrug. Poirot flipped through the pages, stopping when he reached a series of drawings depicting S. Felix in various humiliating situations, one of them showing him tumbling off a cliff. You have a vivid imagination, Poirot said, dry, returning the sketchbook. Don't read too much into it, Bernard replied. It's just a way to vent. As the room fell silent, Poirot moved to the window, his mind racing. The clues were scattered like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle waiting to be assembled. He had Lavinia's account of the figures sneaking out, Camilla's admission of her threatened dismissal, and the pearl necklace purchased just days before S. Felix's disappearance. One must be careful when dealing with lies, he thought, for they are like threads tug on one, and the entire fabric unravels. Turning back to the group, Poirot smiled faintly. The mystery begins to reveal itself. Nuspa, I believe we are closer to understanding what happened to Selix, but there is still more to discover. Messamy, the truth, it seems, is hiding just beneath the surface. The heavy curtains in the drawing room swayed slightly as the wind outside pressed against the windows. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows across the room, but the warmth from the hearth did little to ease the tension simmering within. Lady Genevieve sat stiffly in an armchair, her hands folded tightly in her lap, while Bernard Harcourt leaned against the mantel, tapping his cigarette ash into a small tray. Camilla Sinclair perched on the edge of a velvet sofa, her posture rigid as if poised for flight. Lavinia March scribbled something into her notebook, her pen moving furiously across the page. Poirot, seated near the fire with his hands steepled, observed them all. It was a tableau of hidden emotions, and he, the watchful observer, waited for the cracks to widen. It's all quite convenient, isn't it? Bernard said, suddenly breaking the silence. His voice dripped with sarcasm as he flicked his gaze toward Lady Genevieve. Father disappears, and who benefits the most? The charming young widow, of course. Lady Genevieve's face flushed, and her knuckles whitened as she gripped the arms of her chair. How dare you, Bernard? I have loved your father despite his flaws, and I would never wish him harm. Loved him, Bernard sneered. Let not pretend you married him for his money, and everyone here knows it now that he's conveniently vanished. You stand to inherit everything. How fortunate for you. Poirot interjected, his voice calm but firm. Accusations are dangerous when they lack proof. Perhaps we should consider another possibility. Your own relationship with your father. It was hardly one of harmony, not? Bernard scoffed and pushed off the mantel. Of course we had our differences. He was a tyrant, controlling and manipulative, but do you really think I would go through the trouble of killing him? He wasn't worth the effort. Yet your sketches suggest otherwise. Camilla Sinclair cut in, her voice cold. All those drawings of your father in humiliating poses, some of them depicting his death. You've thought about it plenty. Bernard's eyes narrowed. And what about you? Camilla, father found out you were skimming money from the company he was going to fire you, wasn't he? Maybe you decided to strike first. Enough, Lady Genevieve cried, standing abruptly. Her voice trembled, but she held her chin high. We are tearing each other apart, and none of this will bring Felix back. Miss Poirot, oh please, you must help us. Poirot stood, his expression unreadable. We met. I intend to, but first I must understand the full picture. As the conversation fizzled out, Lavinia March continued scribbling in her notebook, oblivious to the room's shifting mood. Poirot watched her closely. What secrets had she captured with her keen eye and quick pen? Later that night, long after the household had retreated to their rooms, Pooh moved silently through the dimly lit corridors of Harcourt Manor. His instincts had been pricked by something, a ripple in the fabric of deceit that demanded further exploration. The wind howled as he stepped outside, the chill biting through his coat. He stayed close to the shadows, following the path that led to the Cliffs in the distance, he saw a figure moving swiftly toward the rocky edge. He murmured to himself, "La curios me guide." He quickened his pace, careful to keep his steps silent. As he drew closer, the figure stopped near the cliffs where the moonlight revealed a familiar face. "Lady Jvv Poirot," called softly. She spun around, her eyes wide with fear. Beside her stood Captain Geoffrey Abbott, his expression equally startled. Poirot stepped forward, the faintest of smiles curling his lips. "A secret rendezvous, is it not? I wonder what S. Felix would think." Genevieve's breath hitched, and she clutched Abbott's arm. "It's not what you think. We were just talking. May we talking in the dead of night by the cliffs, far from the warmth of the manor. It is most peculiar, Madame Per. Perhaps you would enlighten me as to the nature of this conversation." Captain Abbott exhaled sharply. "You may as well tell him, Genevieve. He already knows too much." Genevieve nodded reluctantly, her gaze fixed on the ground. "Felix knew about us, about my past relationship with Geoffrey. It ended before I married Felix, but he never forgave me for it. He held it over me, always reminding me that I was beholden to him, and now that S. Felix is gone, you are free." Weepu's tone was gentle but probing. "I didn't kill it," she cried. "I swear it. I may have hated the way he controlled me, but I never wished him dead." Poirot studied her for a moment before shifting his attention to Captain Abbott. "And you, Muir, were you here to discuss the past, or perhaps the future?" A.B. jaw tightened. "Felix had threatened to expose me, to ruin my reputation and my business dealings, but I didn't kill him either. We met here tonight to discuss what we would do if he returned." "If he returned," Poirot repeated softly. "Then you believe he is still alive?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," JV whispered. Poirot reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. "Tell me, Captain, is this yours?" He held up a gold cufflink, its surface gleaming in the moonlight. Abbott's face paled. "Where did you find that?" "Near the cliffs," Poirot replied. "Close to where we now stand." Abbott looked away, but Genevieve clutched his arm again. "Geoffrey, please, if you know something I don't," he snapped, pulling away from her. "I lost that cufflink days ago. Anyone could have found it." Poirot tucked the cufflink back into his pocket, his expression thoughtful. "Perhaps, but there is more. Mason is in the fireplace of the drawing room. I found this." He produced a fragment of a torn letter, the edges singed. The words "The Lighthouse" and "A Debt to Be Paid" were faintly visible. Genevieve gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Felix had debts, or perhaps obligations of another kind," Poirot said, "but the meaning of this letter remains unclear for now." The wind howled again, and Poirot gestured toward the manor. "Let us return inside where it is warm. The night air is not kind to those with heavy hearts." As they made their way back, Poe's mind worked tirelessly. The clues were beginning to form a pattern, but the final piece was still missing, the key that would unlock the truth. "Patience," he told himself. "Soon the puzzle will be complete." Chapter 3: Secrets Uncovered. Morning dawned cold and gray, with the sea still restless from the night storm, but it was not the weather that chilled the inhabitants of Hercule Manor. It was the discovery made just after breakfast that sent shock rippling through the house. Camilla Sinclair burst into the drawing room, her face pale as milk and her breathing ragged. "Miss Pooh," she gasped, "Sir Felix's body. They found it in the lighthouse cellar." The room fell silent, as if the air itself had been sucked out. Poirot sat down his cup of tea and rose swiftly, gesturing for her to lead the way. Behind him, Lady Genevieve clutched the back of a chair, her knuckles white, while Bernard Harcourt exchanged a glance with Lavinia Marge, who quickly closed her notebook. Within minutes they reached the lighthouse, its white tower standing stark against the overcast sky. Captain Geoffrey Abbott and Dr. Arthur Winslow were already there, waiting at the base of the structure. Abbott looked grim while Winslow's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his spectacles. "The body is inside," Abbott said quietly, opening the heavy door to the cellar. The air inside was damp and smelled of salt and mildew. A lantern swung from a hook, casting a dim light over the scene. Sir Felix Harcourt lay crumpled beneath a tangled pile of fishing nets. His overcoat was damp and his head rested at an unnatural angle, a deep gash visible near his temple. Poirot approached carefully, his eyes scanning the body and its surroundings. He murmured. "He did not fall. He was struck. The blow came first." And Dr. Winslow hesitated, then knelt beside the body. His fingers probed gently around the wound. "Yes," he confirmed reluctantly, "the injury to the head was the cause of death, judging by the stiffness, as he's been dead since around Midnight Poirot nodded, his gaze falling on a nearby object partially hidden beneath. The nets. He pulled it free and held it up for the others to see, a blood-stained handkerchief embroidered with the initials GA. A Captain Nabat, Pooh said, turning to him. "This is yours, is it not?" Abbott's face darkened. "I don't know how it got there. There, I haven't seen that handkerchief in days." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, tucking the handkerchief into his pocket. His eyes darted to the cellar door. "And this door? Has it been forced?" "Yes," Abbott admitted. "We found the lock broken when we arrived, but as far as I know, only the lighthouse keeper and Sir Felix had keys." "Curiouser and curiouser," Poirot muttered. He glanced at Lady Genevieve, who was leaning against the wall, her face ashen. "Madame, please, you must return to the house. This scene is not for you." She nodded weakly and allowed Bernard to escort her away. Once they were gone, Poirot crouched beside the body again, examining Felix's clothes. In the pocket, he found the fragment of a torn letter, the same one he had partially recovered from the fireplace. "It is complete," he murmured. The full message read, "Meet me at the lighthouse midnight. The debt must be paid." He straightened, his mind working rapidly. "The debt," he whispered. "What debt did you owe Sir Felix and man to whom?" As he turned to leave the cellar, Lavinia March appeared in the doorway, her notebook clutched tightly to her chest. "I heard what happened," she said softly. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Pooh studied her for a moment. "Perhaps, mademoiselle. Earlier you mentioned hearing Felix recite a poem. Do you remember it?" She nodded, pulling out her notebook and flipping to a page where the lines had already been written down. "Yes, it was strange. I overheard him in the library muttering to himself. Just yesterday I noted it down in my diary. The lines went something like this: the keeper waits where shadows dwell upon the shore, a tolling bell. The debt is paid when blood is spilled and secrets buried shall be fulfilled. Does it mean anything to you?" she asked, her brow furrowed. Pooh tapped his chin thoughtfully. "Oui, mademoiselle, it means a great deal. This poem, it is not merely an idle recitation, it is a riddle, one that speaks of betrayal and hidden truths." "Do you think he knew he was going to die?" Lavinia whispered. "Perhaps," Poirot replied, "or perhaps he intended to confront the one who held this debt over him. Either way, it did not end as he expected." They returned to the manor, where Pooh gathered the household in the drawing room. Lady Genevieve, Bernard, Camilla Sinclair, Captain Abbott, and Lavinia all sat in strained silence, awaiting his next move. The storm outside had returned with renewed vigor, the wind rattling the windows. Poirot stood by the fire, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Let us consider what we know. Miami, Sir Felix did not fall by accident. He was lured to the lighthouse, struck on the head, and left to die. The handkerchief, the letter, and the forced door, each clue points to a deliberate act." "Then who did it?" Camilla demanded. Poirot smiled faintly. "Patience, Mel, we are close, but the final revelation requires one more piece of the puzzle." As he spoke, a flash of lightning illuminated the room, casting shadows that seemed to dance across the walls. The truth, Poirot knew, was lurking in those shadows, waiting to be drawn into the light. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "tomorrow the final thread shall be pulled and the entire tapestry will be revealed. The morning after Felix's body had been discovered, the household seemed to vibrate with an almost tangible tension. Rain pattered against the windows, the distant sound of the crashing sea, a constant reminder of the events that had transpired the night before. Hercule Poirot sat in the drawing room, sipping a cup of coffee, his eyes half closed as he reviewed the timeline. In his mind, Mayor Hastings would call it a classic riddle of alias, he muttered to himself, when everyone claims to be everywhere and yet no one is where they should be. He had spent much of the early morning poring over the conflicting accounts given by the guests. Bernard Harcourt had claimed to have been sketching by the cliffs during the storm. Lady Genevieve insisted she had been in her room, too distraught by Felix's disappearance to leave. Camilla Sinclair said she had gone to bed early, citing exhaustion, and Captain Abbott, while his alibi was as vague as it was unconvincing, stating that he had been walking the grounds. Poirot tapped his fingers against the table. "There's a thread of truth hidden among the lies, but I must pull gently lest it snap." He summoned Camilla Sinclair first. She entered the room hesitantly, smoothing her dress as she sat down opposite him. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, "I have been told that Sir Felix intended to dismiss you from his employee. Would you care to elaborate on why?" Camilla's eyes darted to the window, avoiding his gaze. "It was a misunderstanding there were discrepancies in the company accounts, and Sir Felix believed I had been embezzling money, but I swear to you, I made a mistake, yes, but I didn't steal from him. And yet Pooh said, gently, you did not correct this misunderstanding before his death. That must have been difficult. No, to know you were under suspicion. It was, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I tried to explain, but Sir Felix wouldn't listen. He threatened to ruin my career. I had no choice but to stay and hope I could convince him. Pooh leaned forward slightly. And did you convince him, or did you see his death as the end of your problem? Camilla's face flushed. I didn't kill him, Miss Pugh. Oh, I was in my room all night. You can ask the maid. She brought me tea before bed. Ah, but the maid only saw you early in the evening, not later, Pooh pointed out. And you see, mademoiselle, there are footprints leading from the lighthouse toward the servants' quarters. Someone walked that path in the mud last night. Could it have been you? She shook her head vehemently. No, I swear it wasn't me. Then we shall see, Pooh murmured, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. Next he called for Lady Genevieve. She entered, her eyes puffy and red as if she had been crying. Madame Poirot began gently, you've been under great strain, I know, but I must ask, did you truly remain in your room all night, or did you meet someone, perhaps Captain Abbott, as you did before? Genevieve's lips trembled, but she composed herself. I stayed in my room, she said firmly. I couldn't bear to see anyone after Felix disappeared. I was overwhelmed, and yet your fear of being implicated must weigh heavily upon you. Poirot said softly, you had a motive, madam. Sir Felix knew of your past affair and used it to control you. Were you not desperate to be free of him? I didn't kill him, she exclaimed, tears brimming in her eyes. I was afraid, yes, but I would never. Did you know about the blackmail letter? Poirot interrupted gently. JVV blinked. What letter? There is a hidden compartment in S. Felix's desk, Poirot explained, where I found a letter threatening to expose a scandal. It isn't signed, but it speaks of a debt owed and the possibility of ruin. I believe Sir Felix was being blackmailed. No, she whispered. I didn't know. Poirot studied her face for a moment before nodding. Mary, madam, that will be all for now. Finally he called Bernard Harcourt. The young man entered with his usual air of defiance, slumped into the chair as if the entire ordeal bored him. Miss Bernard, Poirot began, you claim to be sketching by the cliffs during the storm. What exactly were you sketching? The waves, Bernard replied lazily. The cliffs, the storm. It was dramatic, and you expect me to believe you were outside during a storm to capture nature's drama? Poirot asked, raising an eyebrow. Believe what you want, Bernard said with a shrug. I didn't kill him. Poirot stood and walked toward the window, gazing out as he spoke. And yet you were angry with your father. You despised him, not your sketches of him falling from the cliffs. Those were not idle fantasies, they were reflections of your deepest desires. Bernard stood abruptly. I didn't act on them, though I couldn't have then. How do you explain the faint trail of mud leading from the cliffs to the servants' quarters? Poirot asked, turning to face him. I don't know, Bernard stammered. You do know, Poirot said firmly, but whether you are the murderer or simply protecting someone remains to be seen. The young man glared at him but said nothing further. As Bernard left, Poirot sat back down, deep in thought. The timeline had gaps, but the web of deceit was becoming clearer. Each person had something to hide, and each alibi was tied to another's lie. Pooh murmured, steepling his fingers. The alibis are like clockwork gears, mommy. If I find the broken cog, the entire mechanism will collapse. Soon the truth will reveal itself. Chapter 4. The final thread. The next morning, crisp and clear, the storm having finally passed, leaving the cliffs glistening in the sunlight. Inside Harcourt Manor, Poirot stood once again in the drawing room, his small frame perfectly composed, his eyes sharp and expectant. The household had gathered at his request. Lady Genevieve, Bernard Harcourt, Camilla Sinclair, Captain Abbott, Dr. Winslow, and Lavinia marched. The air was thick with anticipation, as though everyone knew the moment of truth was at hand. Mayami, Pooh began, his voice calm but commanding. We have arrived at the conclusion of our little drama. Each of you has secrets, motives, and alibis that could suggest guilt, but only one of you committed the crime. Today we shall see how the threads of deception have woven a deadly tapestry. He began, pacing slowly, hands clasped behind his back. Let us first consider the scene at the lighthouse. Sir Felix was lured there under the pretense of a meeting orchestrated through a letter. This letter was recovered in fragments but was later reconstructed, revealing Its purpose to summon S. Felix to his death, he turned to Lady Genevieve, who sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Madam, you feared S. Felix would expose your past affair with Captain Abbott, but you did not kill him. Your fear made you cautious, not murderous, and you, Captain Poirot added, shifting his gaze, were implicated through the handkerchief embroidered with your initials, a handkerchief deliberately placed at the scene to mislead us. You were not the one who struck the fatal blow. Captain Abbott exhaled relief, momentarily washing over his face, but Poe's gaze was already moving to Bernard Harcourt. Miss Berna, you despised your father, and your sketches reveal a deep-rooted resentment, but you did not act on your anger. Instead, you expressed it through art, a safer outlet. Perna shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his mother's gaze. Poirot paused, his gaze settling on Sinclair, who had been sitting rigidly, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest of her chair. Mademoiselle, he said softly, the time has come. Camilla's eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. You had the motive, Poe continued. Sir Felix discovered your embezzlement, a betrayal that could have ruined your career and your life. He confronted you, threatened you, and you had the opportunity. You were trusted enough to arrange the meeting at the lighthouse where he thought he would gain the upper hand, but instead you delivered the fatal blow. Camilla's breathing quickened. I didn't plan to kill him, she whispered. It just happened. I wanted to explain myself, to beg him not to report me, but he laughed. He said I was finished, that no one would hire me again. I panicked. We, Poirot said sympathetically but firmly. In that moment of desperation, you struck him with whatever you could find, but your panic did not end there. You attempted to cover your tracks. You forced the lighthouse door to make it look like a break-in. You planted Captain Abbott's handkerchief. You even staged the scene so that it seemed Sir Felix had been caught in an accident, but as meticulous as you were, you made mistakes. Camilla's gaze dropped to the floor. The perfume, Poirot said, his voice soft but decisive. Your signature scent was faint but unmistakable in Sir Felix's room, and then there was the broken figurine, a gift Sir Felix had given you, one you despised. In your anger, you shattered it, but you left the pieces behind unaware they would become part of the evidence. Camilla sobbed quietly, tears streaming down her face. He left me no choice, she whispered. He was going to destroy everything I worked for. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did happen, Poirot replied, and for that you must face justice. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by Lady JV's quiet sobs. Bernard stared at Camilla, betrayal evident in his eyes, while Captain Abbott shook his head, clearly shocked by the turn of events. Dr. Winslow cleared his throat, but Poirot raised a hand. There is no more to say, Doctor. The truth has been revealed and the authorities will arrive shortly. Camilla was led away quietly, her sobs fading as she disappeared down the corridor. Poirot returned to the window, gazing out at the cliffs and the sea beyond. The storm had passed, leaving the landscape serene, as if nature itself had exhaled a sigh of relief. Justice, Miami, Poirot murmured, may not undo the past, but it restores balance to the present, and in this balance perhaps we find peace. 2 days later, the guests of Harcourt Manor began to depart. The tension that had once suffocated the household lifted. Lady Genevieve retreated to the family's country estate, hoping to find solace away from the memories of the island. Bernard returned to London, though his sketches had taken on a more somber tone. Poirot stood by the jetty, his compact suitcase resting at his side as the ferry approached. Lavinia marched the last to leave. Approached him. You solved the mystery, Miss Poirot, but I wonder, do you ever tire of uncovering such darkness? Poirot smiled faintly. No, Mademoiselle, for where there is darkness there must also be light. The trick is in finding it. As the ferry pulled away from the island, the cliffs of Whispering Isle faded into the distance, but the lessons of its secrets remained etched in Poe's mind. The sea, calm and endless, stretched before him, a reminder that, like the tides, truth always finds its way back to shore. Thank you for tuning in to Cafe Stories. If you enjoyed the intrigue and suspense, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated on more captivating detective adventures. Your support keeps the stories coming and the mysteries alive.